Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am honored and happy to have the opportunity to deliver a talk which so directly complements the speech that you've just given. I'd like to begin with three stories. The first begins in 1976, a time when I, as a young teenager, was obsessed with this institution. Not because I was a communist, indeed I was a right-wing nut. I was a fan of Ronald Reagan at the time, so it wasn't my own personal predilection, but it was a fascination that I had first learned in June of 1976 when I visited this extraordinary country and saw the campaign around this institution. And the fascination with the passion of this institution and the campaign in Italy led me 6 years later to make a trek as a college student across the full part of Eastern Europe and former Soviet republics. And as some of you might remember at the time, the way you traveled in these parts of the countries was that you carried tokens of the West. For example, chewing gum and cigarettes, which you gave as gifts as you traveled around this part of the world. Well, when I came to Bulgaria, the last of the countries that I was traveling, I came across a playground where there were children playing. And I went to the playground to offer them chewing gum. And I was astonished that these children took the gum and had no idea what I was handing them, had never seen it before, had no conception of what this was. So cut off they were from the rest of the West. Now, I was reminded of this in 2005 when I had the opportunity to travel back to Bulgaria to give a lecture at this extraordinary place, the Red House in Sofia. And at this lecture, I spoke to many young people from Bulgaria. And what I found was they were, in 2005, no different from young people anywhere in the West. They were more clueful about issues around the internet than indeed my colleagues at the University of California and at Stanford were back home. That's the first story. That's the second. In 2003, I was invited to come to a conference held by Viacom, one of the leading media companies in the world, at this extraordinarily beautiful place in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was a conference where I was to contribute to a conversation about copyright protection and technology. But as I was known as the copyright anarchist, at least among this group of people, it was more like throwing me as a young Christian into the Colosseum, as the very top leaders of Viacom felt that it was their duty to beat me up in front of the rest of the Viacom executives. So Sumner Redstone lectured me ferociously about how ill-conceived my own ideas were, and this executive was so extreme that he felt it necessary to send me a formal apology after the event for his extraordinary behavior. But after my intervention and my scolding by the senior executives of Viacom, a bunch of junior executives took me aside, leaders of the black station at Viacom and other important young music stations. And they said to me, you need to understand, this is China. And we wait till they die, and then we will take it. Finally, in 2001, I had a beginning of an association with a large number of young French students about issues related to free software and free culture. And my conception of France and these issues was formed through my experience with these young French students. And then just this last year, I was invited to an event in Avignon at the Palace of Popes, where I was asked to give a speech to the leaders of the French cultural industry and the French culture ministry. And I gave this speech, and I was welcomed after the speech with an extraordinary and astonished response. Indeed, the leader of the event told me, mine was a brilliant talk, maybe the best he'd ever heard, but he disagreed with absolutely everything that I said. Now, I was frankly astonished because I had said nothing which any sane person in the world could possibly have disagreed with. My contribution was as banal and ordinary as it possibly could be. So I wanted to understand, what was it that led these people to be so far removed that they thought they could disagree with anything I had said. So I followed the leaders to this event to be held at the University of Avignon, a debate with the students. And on the stage were arrayed about 9 leaders from French media industry, and in the audience were about 300 students. And one by one, students got up and asked the leaders of the French culture industry questions about the internet. Questions that seemed to me obvious about the capacity and the potential for this network. And one by one, the students were corrected and scolded by the leaders on the stage because of their misconceptions about what the future was. And indeed, one leader said that it is my job, quote, to defend the dying ways, which led a student next to me to lean to his friend and say, ever the dream of the dinosaurs. 3 stories. Here's the point. The divide that we see in the world today is less a divide about nations and more a divide about generations. The separation that Generation Y has among each of the different countries where Generation Y lives is less than the separation that the rest of us have in the different cultures within which each of us live. The gap between them, regardless of their country, is less than the gap between us, even us from Western Europe and the United States. And the gap between us and them is large and growing. As we legislate for us in the face of this gap, we increasingly legislate against them. But we need to remember to recognize it is the way of nature. We won't beat them. And the only question is how they will remember us. Whether they'll remember us as I remember this man, or as we remember these people as dinosaurs in an age that is dying and past. So this is an event to celebrate the web, what I think of more as the internet. To understand the internet, we have to understand first what the internet is not. We don't understand the internet by thinking about particular applications, any more than you would understand the importance of the printing press by thinking about particular books, or the importance of the market theorized by Adam Smith if you thought about the particular commodities that were bought and sold within the market. The internet. The thing the internet is a thing that enables, just like the market enables, the printing press enables, the internet enables. What it is an architecture to enable unplanned and unforeseen innovation. Innovation, what others call freedom, innovation. Now, what kind of innovation? Well, if humans were just good, the innovation would be just good. But I don't have to be a professor to remind you, we're not just good. Our societies are mixed between good and evil, and here too, and everywhere, there is good and evil. So there is good on the internet, entities like Google and Facebook and even iTunes, and though it's questioned in some parts of the world, even YouTube, good on the internet. And then there's entities that are bad on the internet. Viruses and spam and zombie bots that take over computers and make them controllable at a distance, and malware in general. These things are awful and destructive across the network. Now, we cheerleaders for the internet, as I have been too many times, spend too much of our time praising the good and forgetting the bad.